Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are not so much two cheeks of the same backside as Godzilla 1 versus Godzilla 2.
One blunders around the stage, babbling incoherently against just about every subset of humanity. The other can't get about the stage much and generally eschews vulgarity, but is deadly serious about being deadly.
The billionaire Trump turns out not to be a billionaire at all, whilst down home Hillary and Bill have amassed a king's ransom, some of it from kings. Who's going to win? Can't they both lose? And what will it mean for us in the rest of the world? We're joined by Professor Inderjeet Parmar, Head of International Politics at London City University. First of all, who do you think's going to win? And secondly, what will be the main difference?
Well, I suspect that Hillary Clinton will win in November, even though the national polling may be quite close. We have to remember that the United States presidential election is 50 separate elections in 50 separate states.
Yes.
And it's not like the EU referendum where they just tot up all the votes and decide who got the most. So it's first past the post 50 times, and the Democrats have an inbuilt structural advantage in terms of electoral college votes, which come from big states like California and New York and so on. There would be important differences, I think, significant differences.
Tell me, because I can't see them.
Between a Trump and a Clinton presidency. I think Clinton presidency would, first of all, if you just look at foreign policy and national security areas, America's kind of global position and role, I don't think there'll be a major change at all in that. Even in terms of questioning what is that role, what are the different institutional bases of that role, what are the goals of it, and the means by which it's to be achieved. So in that regard, I would say Hillary Clinton would stand in a long line of American presidents of both parties over at least since 1941. I think with Donald Trump, there's a little bit more unpredictability. I think that's the big problem, that he has said many, many different things about the Middle East, about South Korea, about Japan, about NATO, such that it's difficult to know exactly what he might do. So I think that's why a lot of people who are seen as national security experts or people who are experienced in that area feel so much worry about him.
But it's the predictability of Hillary Clinton that troubles me. She's predictably fanatic about Israel, for example, on the Israel-Palestine track. She's predictably determined to bring about regime change in Syria. She's predictably hawkish against Russia. She is predictably on her war horse. Now, there's something to be said for predictability, but if it's predictably wrong and dangerous, which is what I think many people in the world see her as, that's a negative, not a positive.
Well, you're asking differences, that's what I was answering. But correct, as I said, Hillary Clinton is a part of a foreign policy establishment mindset, which is hooked into the sort of main bases of American power in the world, and she thinks in that way. So that is a dangerous position in many cases for her to be taking, particularly in regard to a place like Syria, where there are so many different forces at work, and there's obviously a deep crisis, and the kind of the sort of a blowback from that, of the development of destabilizing regional actors, more regional actors and forces like ISIS, for example. I think that is a dangerous thing. I'm not sure whether or not Hillary Clinton presidency would lead to an actual full-scale military intervention into Syria. That it is easier to say that than it actually is to do it, because my own view is that had that been viable, and I felt it was unviable because of what happened in Libya and also what happened in Iraq and the syndromes that have kind of impacted American foreign policy since then. So I'm not sure whether or not that's going to be the case, although they're making a lot of noises, especially in the election campaign, because Democrats, wrongly in my view, appear to be seen as weak in foreign policy and national security.
It's ironic, that, isn't it? Because
despite the fact that they
most
waged most of the wars
were
correct.
What about domestically? They're both more or less the same, aren't they? Two sides of the same Wall Street coin. Both are with Wall Street. Both are, in fact, Hillary is more bloated with Wall Street money and the donations of big business. Neither of them really is going to do much for the main street, are they?
Well, on top of that as well, is that we, of course, we are discussing these foreign issues because we're from abroad and we can see the impact and the legacies of those foreign issues. But in the US, the people hardly know what's happening or care what's happening outside of their state, leave alone the United States. So the domestic is really important for the people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where they live and that's where they work, and their healthcare, their education, people's work and so on is all exactly locally based. But I think both may be for Wall Street, but I don't think Wall Street is for both of them unequally. If you look at the numbers, Hillary Clinton, as you said, has received a very large amount of money and is continuing to do so from Wall Street donors. In fact, Hillary and Bill's pretty much 50% of their income annually comes from speaker fees at those kinds of institutions. Donald Trump, as far as I've read, and whatever surveys that have been done, he's only received $19,000 from Wall Street donations. So they're not voting for him.
No.
And I think they're running from him in great numbers.
Really?
Partly because of his unpredictability. That makes everybody insecure, especially those markets, which they watch all the time. But also because he's anti-globalization, and it's anti-capitalist globalization. Well, he says he is.
He wants to build walls.
He wants to build walls. He wants to stop movement of peoples. And therefore, I think he threatens some of that rhetorically. Now, he's a billion... Well, he has a large amount of money because he's had to spend large amounts of it on his own campaign because he's finding it very difficult.
Now, he gets it back from the state now. But no, you're right. Yeah. She's the big money candidate, and that was one of the Bernie Sanders campaign platforms.
Yeah, correct.
And he's got $19,000 from big business. Is that because, though, they all see her as the winner and they want to back the winning horse? Or because they think he might actually threaten the NAFTA, the other free trade agreements that the US wishes to conclude in Asia, in Europe, and that he will, as it were, withdraw America from much of the global playground that they have been dominating for so long?
I think it's the unpredictability of Donald Trump. I don't think anybody can manage him. His own campaign seems to renew itself, and its campaign management is renewed every few weeks. He sacks one person, puts another person in who seems to me to be even more right-wing and audacious than previously. So if they can't manage him and his family can't manage him, it'd be very difficult for anybody else in the position that he would be in. So I think unpredictability is one of the biggest problems.
Now, you're an expert on American politics, so maybe you can help me with this question. Out of all those people, with all those achievements to their name, this blessed country from sea to shining sea, how did we end up with a choice between two Godzillas?
I think the reason we are where we are today for America globally and at home is because of a fix in the 1970s which has borne out full fruit in a way, in directions which were probably not predictable at that time. In the 1970s, there was a threat from the Third World, a sort of a post-colonial leadership, for a new international economic order to readjust the structure of world power economically, politically, and institutionally. And one of the big fixes was to divide that Third World, if you like, was the picking out by the likes of David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski and many others, was to pick out what they called middle-class powers from the Third World countries. Countries which had a future in the world system as led by the United States, and in which investment would eventually bear fruit, such that they would have a stake in that system. That depended on the export of a large amount of industrial capital, which was previously largely invested in the Western countries, particularly Britain and the United States. That deindustrialization is one of the reasons why the sort of people who are supporting Trump in such a hardcore way are supporting him, because he is
blue collar,
the GOP,
working
the
class.
grand old party, which has run on low taxes and small government, has delivered nothing to those Reagan Democrat kind of blue collar voters. And they have now finally come to the point where they are revolting against the GOP. And that is the reason why Trump, if you like, he's the only one who speaks to them, like them, and their problems. There's a wonderful new book called Hillbilly Elegy, which is by a guy who's just finished at Yale, but who comes directly out of those kind of communities in the Appalachian Mountains and so on. But he explains who this white ethno-nationalist, kind of Scots-Irish immigrant descendants are, that they are a kind of white tribe which sees itself as increasingly heading towards extinction. But they've seen their country from the 1970s onwards, as they see it, going to the outsiders, African Americans, immigrants, other minorities, who've come in and taken a big share of the American dream, which they've been kind of left behind with. So one of the reasons why we are in today, and that they have a particular experience, and I think that they have a kind of right-wing, racialized response to their, what is really a kind of class-based problem. But if you look at the Sanders movement as well, there's quite a large part of the sort of other people, sort of lower middle class people, who are supporting Sanders precisely for the same kinds of reasons, that the opportunity and for a good income, for a good career, without college debt of being in hundreds of thousands of dollars, healthcare provided which doesn't cripple you if you can't find a decent job and so on.
But without the easy scapegoating.
Right, without the scapegoating. That's what makes Trump a populist, because I don't believe that he will deliver on anything for those people. Whereas I think somebody like Sanders probably could have shifted political and economic power a little bit in that direction, because there is room for maneuver within the American political system. We've seen over the last 100 years, you know, you've got the progressive movement before the First World War, you got the New Deal, the Great Society programs in the 1960s, but also you've seen the right-wing responses to those as well.
It's fascinating. Professor, thanks for joining us on the Sputnik.
Welcome.
Coming up next, the war of the rich against the poor. It's the Saudi slaughter in Yemen. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Sputnik. The world's richest dictatorship has blasted its way into an internal squabble in its neighbour, Yemen. A squabble in which both of the contenders for power have long been its own clients.
Saudi Arabia is using Western weapons and expertise to destroy the always scant infrastructure of its impoverished neighbor. No school, hospital, bridge, mosque, highway or public building is safe from the latest military hardware on the market.
Virtually no media covers the subsequent slaughter, even though Yemen is a former British colony, and the 1960s massacre by the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders in the Crater district of Aden was the last hurrah of the official British Empire in 1967. But one man and his friends who hasn't passed the Yemenis by on the other side of the road is Dr. R.S. Karim, co-founder of Mona Relief Yemen, and he joins us now. Doctor, thanks for coming on board the Sputnik. Just for the viewer who almost certainly knows far less than they ought to about what's happening in Yemen, please tell us the current situation.
Thank you for having me first. Since I'm a humanitarian, the political views that I present will purely be my personal political views. As far as Mona Relief's humanitarian work, we basically look at the need and not the cause. So
tell us what the need is then.
Oh, the need is absolutely incredible right now. There is no food, which is primary. About 12,000 people have died as a result of direct hits. This is not counting the thousands who are dying from malnutrition and other sicknesses and illnesses, people who are in the hospital on their deathbed without any medicines. So normally, you know, the figures that we get from the United Nations are not the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is completely and entirely different.
And how is it possible that nobody covers and therefore nobody knows about what's going on there? As I say, in Britain, especially, because it's actually formerly a British colony.
There is a media blackout. According to the reports that we have, or I personally have, is that the Saudi agents have basically bought chunks of primetime airtime from TV stations and paid them copious amounts of money on the condition that nothing about Yemen would be said on television.
Well, nothing is said. I don't know the reason why. It may be that access to the country is difficult. Indeed, it was under siege, and Mona Relief broke that siege, didn't it?
Mona Relief started on Twitter. I was talking to a friend of mine in Yemen who is a journalist, and he was trying to solicit for little funds so he can feed some families that he knows. And he was being successful at that, but nothing major. And so we started talking about the situation in Yemen, and I told him, I said, this has to go much larger than it is. And this was in the beginning of April 2015, when the war had already started. And so we decided that we were going to create a hashtag which was called 20 for Yemen. And anybody who donated $20 or 20 pounds, they would be able to feed an entire family for a month. And a lady by the name of Mona gave us our first 1,000 pounds. We took the 1,000 pounds and we bought food, which is very expensive in Yemen itself because of the blockade. But we had some good people who basically were willing to work with us. So we bought some food internally and started distributing it in an area called Harf Sufyan, which was suffering a lot at that time. And we took the pictures and we put them on Twitter and said, this is what we have done so far. Please, would you be able to help us? And in about a week, Twitter had given us almost 5,000 pounds.
But how did you get the relief in?
I can tell you we got the relief in, but I won't be able to tell you the secret behind it, because if I do,
you'll have to kill me.
No, they will kill me. I want them to kill you. They will kill me. But yes.
It is a shameful business, isn't
it? It is.
Yemen is the poorest Arab country.
Correct.
It's one of the poorest countries on the earth.
Correct.
Its next door neighbor, Saudi Arabia, is one of the richest countries on the earth.
Correct.
And not only is Saudi Arabia not helping its poor next door neighbor, it's pulverizing it with the world's most expensive and advanced weapons sold to them by us.
That's
correct.
Now, which part of that scandal does the British media not understand? Have you been able to entice or interest anyone in the British media about this?
Well, I have spoken loud and clear with television stations like Press TV and you know, in as far as the local media is concerned, they're disinterested. Let's put it that way. Even if they're interested, they're told that this is too political and it is going to go against us. So let's not do it.
Yes.
You know.
Syria fills the airwaves and fills the media, whilst Yemen is completely ignored. You have to smell a rat here, very big, large rat.
That is correct. It's a rodent. Yeah, you're right.
So they're not covering obviously the war being waged onto Yemen. They're not covering then the following uprising that happened this weekend with almost
a million people on the streets.
On the streets.
Saudi Arabia bombed it. They bombed.
That's right.
There's no country on the earth that would bomb
That's correct.
a parade of 1 million people.
The other side effect is that because the Yemenis now had to come together to uprise, they've left a vacuum for Al-Qaeda to rise. Yeah, and they are creating mini-states within Yemen. So the problems are accumulating.
See, Yemen, let's not forget, is very strategically placed, extremely strategically, for two reasons. One is that they have the Bab el-Mandab, which is the choke point of getting into Africa, into the Indian Ocean. And the other is the Socotra Islands. The Socotra Islands were where, if I'm not mistaken, was where the American base was. That is one island from where you can actually keep an eye on the entire Arabian Peninsula. It sits right at the bottom of Yemen. And from there, you can gauge the Strait of Hormuz, which is controlled by Iran. You can gauge the Bab el-Mandab, which Saudi Arabia wants desperately, because they want to transport their oil from there, and also keep an eye on the economic situation from China, because that is where all the Chinese goods go into Africa from. And so the idea is to keep Yemen fighting and keep Somalia fighting. Because either of the two, if you have a solid nationalist leader who puts his foot down, then everything goes to hell in a handbasket.
And so they're prepared to see Al-Qaeda and ISIS take control
Absolutely.
of the coastline,
They finance them.
of Aden.
They finance them.
Yeah.
They finance
They
them.
have
You know,
Al-Qaeda
for
has
them,
taken
it's
control
nothing.
of some ports.
Of course it has. Of course
So
it
Saudi
has.
Arabia is destroying Yemen and encouraging Al-Qaeda and ISIS in this vitally strategic part of the world.
Correct.
Rather than see the return to power of someone that they used to have very good relations with, whose life they saved.
Right.
Who
was
took him,
Saleh.
airlifted him to hospital, saved his life. Now he's come back and wants his job back. And suddenly it's a cause for the destruction of thousands of people, many of them, of course, children and women.
Yeah, they are basically bombing them with impunity.
It's not going to work. The Yemenis are very good fighters, as the British found, as many would-be conquerors have found.
Egypt would vouch for that too. Gamal Abdel Nasser was.
Indeed. The Saudis are not very good fighters.
No.
They've kind of gotten out of that habit. They can't persuade anyone to come and fight this war for them. No. They tried to bribe Pakistan to send its army and fight the war for them.
Correct.
What's going to happen? What's going to be the end of all this?
Well, right now, the way I see it, Saudi Arabia is trying to save face. They may have won the battle, but they lost the war. Yemen are the warriors of Arabia. They don't give up. Those people dug their feet in so deep because this is their country and they're not going to give up ever. So right now, it's between Prince Mohammed.
The Saudi effectively crown
Correct.
prince.
This was his baby. This was his do something really big.
This was his baby, to kill a lot of babies.
Exactly. It was do something really big so that you can get next in line for the throne.
Well, that hasn't worked.
Well, that didn't work because now, how do you get out of Yemen?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
It's easy to start wars. It's very difficult to
They have no
finish them.
exit strategy at all.
Dr. Karim, thanks for joining us, and I wish the Mona relief every success, and I hope everyone watching it does too.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
joining us.
Thank you very much.
And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So on the race between Godzilla 1 and Godzilla 2, Khalid Ali says that the world is worse off either way, and he thinks that with Trump it will be more so, whereas Conspicuous says that Trump is the lesser of the evil.
Well, one is obviously evil, and the other is quite likely to
Probably,
be
yeah.
evil. So I think we have to end this lesser evilism. That's why I'm supporting Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate,
Yes,
who sat right
here.
there where you're sitting now.
Indeed. And on the unfortunate war in Yemen, Ricardo Picasso says that half of the arms that Saudi Arabia kept is in Yemen, and the rest are in ISIS hands now.
Yeah, well, it could be in ISIS hands in both countries, Yemen and in Syria. It is a monumental scandal. It's bigger than the Himalayas, this scandal. Yet it's in plain sight, but nobody wants to see it.
Well, that's all the tweets that we have for this week.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
You can stay in touch with us through social media. On Twitter, it's RT_Sputnik. On Facebook, it's Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.